Lucy and Harry were playing in their back garden, kicking their football between each other, when they booted it over the fence and into the woods beyond. The two children raced out through the back gate to find it. They searched high and low, ducking under bushes and parting the undergrowth. Then Harry saw it beneath a holly bush and crouched down to grab it. But the 6-year-old leapt backwards and cried out in alarm. His sister ran over to him and peered into the bush. The soccer ball was there, but there was something else next to it. A flash of beige silvery fur, some dark-colored legs and a shiny black nose were all wrapped up together in a bundle of fur. She gasped. It was a little fox cub, or kit as they are also called. At first, the two children didn't know if it was alive or dead. It wasn't moving. Lucy grabbed a stick and carefully prodded it. It twitched and it lifted its head. It was tiny and the two children cooed over it for a little while, but they could tell that it wasn't very well. Its eyes were covered in pus and it smelt very bad. Lucy and Harry rushed back to the house, calling for their mum. Sarah came outside and followed the children back to the bush. She shook her head, telling them that there was little chance the fox cub would make it. She believed that it had been abandoned by the mother, who had likely moved on with the other cubs. When the children insisted that they must try to save the pathetic-looking animal, Sarah put on a pair of gloves and carried it inside. It was floppy in her hands. It had terrible diarrhea which had caked its backside and dried on its hind legs. Its eyes were sealed shut from a serious eye infection. Sarah placed the weak cub in the utility room sink and ran some warm water over its backside, washing out the filth. She then gently wiped the eyes with some cotton wool, clearing away the white gunk. When she did so, the cub opened its eyes. It was not only weak, but it was very dehydrated. Its eyes were sunken, and it had no desire to escape from the people who were holding it. The little cub had no fight in it. Lucy and Harry grabbed a syringe from the medicine cupboard in the bathroom and brought it downstairs, where Sarah filled it with water and squirted it into the fox's mouth. She knew it wasn't going to survive, and there was nothing she could do to help it. So she called the local wildlife rescue center. They took the cub into the center and saw a vet. Although there was little hope for the cub, they all refused to give up. The vet gave Sarah and the children sachets of electrolytes to replenish the salts that the cub had lost, a worming tablet and a long-lasting antibiotic injection. They were then allowed to take the fox home and care for it themselves. The children barely left its side. They made a little bed for it out of a pile of towels and continued to squirt warm water into its mouth throughout the day. They also placed a bowl of wet cat food next to it. When they came down in the morning, they weren't sure if the cub would have made it through the night. It had been so weak the day before and hadn't shown any interest in the food they had offered it. But surprisingly, the little cub was alive and looked up when the children walked into the utility room. It tried to scuttle away from them but fell over as its legs were so weak. Now, giving it the electrolytes and water was a bit more of a challenge because it had some fight in it. But the children simply adored it and named it Holly because she was found underneath a holly bush. With the patience and devotion of the family, the little cub grew stronger and stronger. When Lucy and Harry came home from school each day, they raced into the utility room and sat down on the floor. They started holding out food for the cub to eat. Slowly but surely it became less timid, and it was only a matter of weeks before the fox would happily take food from their hands. They let it venture into the garden and it stuck by them, following them around in the bright sunshine. Holly had come a long way. Her diarrhea and eye infection had cleared up and she was gaining weight. She ate hungrily when presented with food and lapped at the water bowl. It was sad that Holly had been abandoned by her family, but she had somehow found a new one. Despite their attachment to the little fox cub, Sarah knew that they couldn't keep her forever. Although they had gone some way to taming her, she was still a wild animal and belonged in the wild. The day came when Sarah had to tell the two children to say goodbye to Holly. They opened the back gate and Holly dutifully trotted out after them. Sarah, Lucy and Harry walked some distance into the woodland. The fox cub sniffed the ground suspiciously. It had never been out of the garden before and everything was new and fresh. The scents, the sounds and the path before her were all unfamiliar and she hesitated. Lucy and Harry placed a bowl of cat food down for the fox and stroked it on the head, saying goodbye before walking back to the back garden. The little fox watched them leave and then tucked into the food greedily. The two children couldn't hold back the tears, but Sarah knew it was the right thing to do. She sat up all night worrying about the little fox cub, wondering if it would be able to survive on its own. The next morning, she opened the back gate and walked into the wood where they had released the cub the day before. There was no sign of it, and the bowl was empty. Sarah filled the bowl once more and left it in the same spot. She did this every day, month after month. Each time she checked on the bowl, it was empty. Of course, she didn't know if it was the little fox that was eating the food or one of the many other animals that lived in the woodland, but she hoped that it was providing the fox with some nourishment if it was otherwise struggling to find food. Sarah kept telling herself that the cub was born wild and had strong instincts, so would be able to hunt by itself. But she worried that maybe their intervention had taken that wild streak away from it. She had read that fox mothers bring live animals back to the den for their cubs to play with, giving them a chance to practice hunting before they venture out into the big wide world at around 6 months of age. She had never given Holly any live animals to play with. Almost a year passed, and Sarah stopped putting food out. She didn't even know if Holly was still alive, and decided that it was best to let nature be nature. As the years passed, the children never forgot about their incredible experience raising the little fox cub and teaching it to eat out of the palms of their hands. They never forgot how she would follow them around the garden, or prick her ears and stare at them with her wide eyes when they came in from school each afternoon. But 3 years later, the family were in for a shock. As dusk was setting in, Sarah glanced out of the kitchen window and into the back garden. Something had caught her eye. The children had left the back gate open, and now, standing in the opening, was a fox. It was a rusty brown color with a white chest and a dark tail, and it was staring at the house. Sarah held her breath. Was this Holly? Was this the fox they had looked after 3 years before? Sarah waited and watched intently, hardly daring to breathe. Then she quietly called to the children who came running. All 3 of them stood and stared at the fox through the window. Then it started walking across the garden, stopping to sniff the ground every few paces. It kept walking all the way up to the back door. Lucy and Harry grinned at each other and raced to the back door. But when they turned the door handle, the fox scurried away. Perhaps it wasn't Holly after all. They didn't have any cat food in the house anymore, but Harry took some cooked chicken from the fridge and threw some onto the lawn. They stood and waited until the fox reappeared. It had to be Holly. No other wild fox would come back, even if food was thrown at it, they thought. As the fox sniffed the chicken on the ground, its eyes never left Sarah's. Then it gobbled the food up and looked up for more. Harry held some out in his hand, and the fox's nose twitched, but it hesitated, reluctant to get any closer. But Harry persisted and crouched down. Then, very slowly, the fox walked up to him. It sniffed the food and took it carefully out of Harry's palm. Harry looked directly into its eyes. He was certain that this was Holly. She had the same twinkle in her eye. When it had eaten the food, the fox stared at the family standing in the doorway for a few moments before trotting across the garden and back into the woods. Sarah and the children couldn't tell for sure if this was really Holly, but somehow, when they had looked into the fox's eyes, they felt like they knew her. She was bolder than any other wild fox they had come across, and the encounter gave Sarah the peace of mind that she had been wanting all along, that she had made the right decision in releasing Holly back to the wild.